So you do my job, please.
Thank you.
I messed it up. So you take this microphone, does it work?
Hello?
Yeah. It works. Go ahead. Please introduce Maria.
I figured I wouldn't put this tool to waste, so I volunteered to give this introduction. First of all, I am still in awe of the panel we had this afternoon of the women muckrakers. Brilliant, courageous sisters who were part of that panel, and to all my sisters here. I have never seen such a show of solidarity among my investigative sisters and a few brothers. Our keynote speaker for tonight, I have the honor to introduce her, is one of those sisters. She has been accused of many things. She's currently out on bail, facing multiple charges, including libel, tax evasion, and violating the law against foreign investments in the media. She has been arrested twice and sued 11 times in the last 13 months. To come to this conference, she's had to pay a travel bond. In the past year, her news organization has shelled out $50,000 in bail and travel bonds, and thousands of dollars more in lawyers' fees. These are stupendous sums for a small company. And just this week, a businessman asked the court that she pay $1 million for damages for a lawsuit that he filed several years after the story about him had been published. Maria Ressa and Rappler, the feisty website she founded, carry the torch of press freedom and independent media in the Philippines. They are the thorn on President Rodrigo Duterte's side, the pebble in his shoe. Against them, Duterte has unleashed not just lawsuits, but also a troll army. The entire Rappler staff, including their drivers, are banned not just from the presidential palace, but from any place where Duterte happens to be. A few weeks ago, Duterte even accused them of smelling bad. Seriously, body odor? When did that become a crime? Maria Ressa is not alone. She's not the only journalist in this room doing watchdog reporting in a country held in thrall by a populist president. Many of you have been called lying press, bullshit, garbage, sons or daughters of bitches. Our president has even said, just because you're a journalist, you are not exempted from assassination if you're a son of a bitch. How did we get to this? Maria Ressa began her journalism career after the dictator Ferdinand Marcos was ousted in a people power revolution in 1986. That was a hopeful time, and journalists were basking in the new freedoms. Since then, the Philippines has lurched from one crisis to the next, but never has the media been under siege. Maria has been a reporter, news anchor, an executive for Philippine TV and at CNN, where she was Manila and Jakarta bureau chief. She's also written 2 books on terrorism in Southeast Asia. In 2012, as social media was transforming the information landscape in the country, Maria founded Rappler, first as a Facebook page and then as a digital startup. Fearless and spunky, Rappler has made innovative use of the web and social media to reach out to a millennial audience. In 2016, Duterte was elected president. He is the Facebook president, having been propelled to power in part through the clever use and manipulation of Facebook during his campaign. He has also been called the Death Squad president. Thousands have been killed in his iron-fisted campaign against drugs and crime, the victims, the poorest in society. Rappler and Maria stood up to Duterte. They showed how he weaponized the internet, unleashing fake news and troll armies. They exposed police impunity in the deadly war on drugs. They told the truth and so made enemies. Trolls have threatened Maria with rape and death. Her reporters can't wear the Rappler logo outside of their office for fear of attacks. They have monthly drills to prepare for arrests and raids. There's armed security outside their office. They are planning for contingencies, including being shot down. Maria herself carries bail money in her purse in case of arrest. Others in the country have been cowed by threats. Not Rappler, not Maria. Maria is with us tonight because she and her team are a shining example to the world of the principled resistance to the erosion of democratic norms. They have also shown how a newsroom founded by women, led by women, and staffed mostly by women can stand up to a misogynist president with equanimity, courage, and grace. Ladies and gentlemen, Maria Ressa.
Start speaking. But you know, I am most of the time alone when I speak to you, but I have to ask, give me 2 seconds. I have to ask the Rappler sitting in the audience, our managing editor, Glenda Gloria, one of the founders, Patricia Evangelista, the incredible drum corps team, except to say you made me cry before I began to speak. The line tonight is one line, and strangely enough, I first heard it when talking about terrorists, right? This is a line I'm going to repeat several times. I'm going to say it now. It is, an attack on one is an attack on all. An attack on one is an attack on all. The first time I heard that was when 20 years ago almost, when I was doing the stories on Al-Qaeda, this vitriolic ideology that was rolling the world. That was what the terrorists said to justify their attacks. Then at a pivotal moment, when I was still just learning to deal with this new weapon that's been used against journalists, a woman who's in the audience, Julie Passetti, she actually told me, you have to speak, because I was afraid. And within 24 hours, she turned it around, included the story in a book for UNESCO, and it came out in 2017. The title of that book is An Attack on One is an Attack on All. I say that because Dave Kaplan calls all of us sitting in the audience today the special forces for truth. Investigative journalists are needed today more than ever because no time has ever demanded such persistence and courage as now. This is an existential moment where if we don't take the right steps forward, democracy as we know it is dead. The more I study this time, it started with technology. I fell in love with technology. Then after that, after we saw the disruption of other industries, of course, our industry was disrupted. The attacks against journalists, the attacks against facts, the attacks against democracy. I'm convinced that the attacks against us and our values are so insidious that the equivalent of an atomic explosion has actually happened. It has ruptured our world, but all we do is chip away at the tip of the iceberg we can see. Again, keep this in mind when I speak. An attack of massive casualties has occurred, and no one knows about it. Very few see it, and we need to do more. I have 3 points for you tonight. The first, the battle for truth, special forces. Second, the role of American social media platforms. And then finally, because I'm not going to leave you with the problem, how are we going to solve it? When journalists are under attack, democracy is under attack. Social media platforms are now the world's largest distributor of news. They took that power away from news groups, but while they've taken the revenues, they've ignored the gatekeeping powers that news groups that we've had, right? So they took the money, but they gave away the responsibility. They kept the responsibility with us. It takes courage to fight back against this insidious manipulation that the platforms have enabled. The new attacks are personal, they are visceral. I was going to show you some of them, but my team said stop. I wanted to show you slides. There's some that are so creative, very sexual, but essentially what happens is lies laced with anger and hate spread faster than facts. I mean, we've always known this. Facts are kind of boring, right? We spend our careers learning how to tell great stories. This really hit me last December when Time magazine named me one of the guardians of truth. At that point in time, I realized that among the journalists who were killed in the Capital Gazette, the Reuters journalists who at that point were still in prison, and me, Jamal Khashoggi, the most brutal murder that shook all of us, right? Among those four guardians of truth, I was the only one who was both alive and free. It made me think that never before has our profession, protecting our democracies, looking after facts, never before has it demanded so much from us and demanded courage. The battle for truth really is, Sheila brought this up, I'm going to do this, excuse me a second. I shouldn't do that at the beginning. This, I think, the battle for truth, this is the battle of our generation. And with technology as the accelerant, today a lie told 1,000,000 times, pounded 1,000,000 times, that becomes fact. Without facts, we don't have truth. Without truth, there's no trust. Without trust, without these three, there cannot be democracy, right? News groups, I hear us all the time talking about how did we lose the trust? It's, you were systematically attacked. We are far from perfect, but the data we have in the Philippines, the data from a database that's now more than 1 terabyte large, we call it the Shark Tank, that shows us the systematic attack against news groups. This is why democracy is broken around the world. In our country, these bottom-up exponential attacks on social media, astroturfing, you know the phrase? Fake grass, astroturfing, and creating a bandwagon effect, soften the ground before the same lies come top-down from our top government officials. Sheila told you, I know this firsthand. In about 13 months, the Philippine government filed at least 11 cases and investigations against me and Rappler. I was arrested twice in a 5-week period this year. I posted bail 8 times in about 3 months. And I've done nothing but be a journalist. I have committed no crime, but it's now a crime. And it's coming soon to a democracy near you. I've seen social media and our legal system weaponized against those who ask questions, who stand up for values, who demand the rights that are guaranteed in our Constitution. When I was first arrested The first time, the officer told me, and he said this in Tagalog, "Ma'am, trabaho lang po." "Ma'am, it's only a job." Then he lowered his voice to a whisper and read me my Miranda rights. He was sheepish, he was embarrassed, he was really uncomfortable. And I almost felt sorry for him, except he was arresting me, right? And think about it, this is the last act in a chain of events that is meant to intimidate and harass us because we're journalists. This officer was a tool of power and an example of how a good man can turn evil and how great atrocities happen. Remember, Hannah Arendt wrote about the banality of evil when describing men who carried out the orders of Hitler in Nazi Germany, how career-oriented bureaucrats can act without conscience because they justify that they're only following orders. This is how a nation loses its soul. So you have to know what values you're fighting for. And you have to draw the lines now, where on this side you are good, and on this side you're evil. I've said this so often, we have to hashtag hold the line. The second one is about American social media platforms, right? As many of you know now, I'm both a partner and a critic of Facebook. We're frenemies, comfortably so with each other. Rappler is one of 2 Filipino fact-checking partners in the Philippines. As Sheila said, Facebook is essentially our internet. The Philippines was the canary in the coal mine in 2016 because Filipinos globally spend the most time online, more than 10 hours a day, and on social media. 4th year in a row, we're the top users of social media around the world. But look at our country, because we are democracy's dystopian future. Early this month, I was with Cambridge Analytica whistleblower Christopher Wiley. You know, he's just turning 30 years old, right? He told me that the Philippines, and this is a direct quote, creates an ideal petri dish where you can experiment on tactics and techniques that you wouldn't be able to as easily as in the West. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. You won't get caught. And if it does work, then you can then figure out how to port that to the West. We were the testing ground. The target was the West, America and the West. I asked him if the Philippines paved the way for Brexit and Donald Trump. You know what he said? He sidestepped a little bit, uncomfortable, but here's his entire quote, so stay with me. Quote, "Filipino politics kind of looks a lot like the United States. You've got a president who was Trump before Trump was Trump. And you have relationships with people close to him with SCL and Cambridge Analytica, and you had a lot of data being collected. The second largest amount of data after the United States was collected in the Philippines." The kid behind the psychological operations web of Steve Bannon, do we remember this, right? In a company backed by Robert and Rebecca Mercer. He added this line, and here's another great quote, "Colonialism never died, it just moved online." So this nightmare began for us in Rappler more than 3 years ago. Rappler wrote the first pieces about it in 2016. I wrote 2 of the 3 parts. Another founder wrote the 3rd part. This is the first series. Our reward, an average of 90 hate messages per hour. I say this all the time, 90, not 19. It was shocking. It was the first time I dealt with anything like this, and worse than being in a war zone for me. It's easier to be in a war zone than to deal with things you have no idea whether it's right or wrong, right? Whether it's real or not. If nothing changes, what's happened to us is going to happen to you, if it's not already happening now. And listening to some of the panels, we know it is happening now. Underlying all of this is greed and fear. In our case, the violence of brutal drug war that the UN says has killed at least 27,000 people, far more than the official number of 5,500. People are afraid to stand up because they can see the costs, right? Rappler in the Philippines is a cautionary tale. And one of my arresting officers said it best when he was trying to silence one of our young reporters who was live streaming when I was being led out of our office. They're so good. That was a drill. But this officer whispered to one of them and said, "Be quiet or you're next." This online micro-targeting, ad-driven business model structurally undermines human will. Our personal experiences are sucked into a database, organized by artificial intelligence, then sold to the highest bidder. It is, and has always been, about power and money. That has also taken money away from news groups. This is the irony, of course, right? They've taken the revenues and at the same time provided the platforms that have attacked our credibility. If nothing is done, this is a foundational threat, not just to democracy, but to markets and to election integrity. I start thinking about the social media platforms now as behavioral modification systems, where we voluntarily enter. We are Pavlov's dogs, right? Except we voluntarily did it. And let me quote Wiley again, as well as BlackBerry co-founder Jim Balsillie. These were the two men who I first heard say this. They said, data at this micro-personal level is not oil. That's what we all write, right? It's not oil. They called it plutonium. And we need to treat it like plutonium, with all the care that requires. Remember I said an atom bomb has exploded and we all didn't know about it. Until we accept that an atom bomb has exploded, we can't solve the problem. So what can we do? Here's the last part. First, collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. Journalists need to collaborate. We in this room need to collaborate. Throw out your old definitions. This is a brand new world. Collaborating isn't easy. I know this in the Philippines. We are trying our best with everyone. News groups are born to compete. But what we're not seeing is that we're no longer competing against each other. We're competing against disinformation networks. We're competing to tell the facts. In the Philippines, our data tells us that news groups, when we look at our information ecosystems, news groups have been pushed to the periphery. We're on the edges. And in the center are the disinformation networks. Some of them linked to Russian disinformation networks, and now we are watching as Chinese accounts are coming in. They are all actively sharing each other while the journalists are not. This is how alternative realities bloom. Remember that they don't just want you to take one action. They want you to lose trust in everything, right? We have to stop taking the bait of emotions, seek what we have in common over what drives us apart, because that's the way the bad guys are working. They take a fracture line in any of our societies and they pound it until it breaks open. We've watched this formed in the Philippines. And it's not just a journalist. Let's bring in the academics, tech, civil society, the truth tellers. We have to join forces to protect the facts, the foundation, the facts. We have to fight now while we're strong, because as we have learned in Rappler, you only get weaker over time, because this virus of lies saps civic engagement. If you have no facts, civil society becomes apathetic, and the voice with the loudest megaphone wins. Second, we need to demand enlightened self-interest from tech companies. I use the phrase from ASEAN, enlightened self-interest. It is in their interest to fix this. Because, well, in the long term, yes, education is a solution. Medium term, it is media literacy. But in the here and now, who can fix this? It is only the tech platforms. We've lost our power in this, right? Only the tech platforms that can do something meaningful. No matter how many investigative pieces we write, if it never reaches the intended audiences, if the distribution is flawed, then we're speaking. What's the sound of one hand clapping, right? Third, we need to create a global database. It's about data, a global database of disinformation networks and a global Interpol that stops the impunity that nations and companies are getting away with every day. Remember, after the Holocaust and World War II, the world got together to try to stop people from doing the worst to other people. We needed to protect humanity against ourselves, right? And that was when we got Bretton Woods, NATO, the UN Declaration of Human Rights. We have to ask those same values today. What are the values that govern the internet? How do we punish offenders? This isn't one group that can fix this. This is a global solution. We need to seriously come together because an attack on one is an attack on all. Power and bullies will never stop if you give in to them. We at Rappler, we live this every day. Early this month, our presidential spokesman and chief legal counsel to President Duterte threatened to file cases against 2 news groups. Yes, Rappler was one of them. Because we called out a glaring conflict of interest. He split hairs and he attempted to redefine his actions right in front of us based on a technicality. The next day, one news group apologized. We thought about it. We did not. Here's the twist. The spokesman threw the apology back. It wasn't enough, right? The apology wasn't enough for our palace spokesman. His words and actions ultimately justified Rappler's decision to #hold the line. Political bullies who threaten and abuse journalists are never happy until they get complete capitulation. Don't take the first step. Our battle is your battle. Protect the rights guaranteed by our democracies, or watch them slowly erode in plain sight. This is the challenge for all of us today. For next year's Global Investigative Journalism Conference, the question we should walk away with now is, what can we put in place today to protect all of our tomorrows? What you have done for me and Rappler, thank you for shining the light. I hope that we're prepared to do that for every single journalist under attack. Because you have to remember, an attack on one is an attack on all. Thank you.